Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Chris Young called Losing Sleep. So I gotta be honest, this is not the country record I want to be reviewing right now. If I had my way, I'd be covering Turnpike Troubadours and Dory Freeman, two artists that I would argue are making far more interesting and compelling country music, and I'm desperately hoping that my schedule and my patrons contributing to it will enable me to talk about them as soon as possible. But before then, we have to get through a record from an artist that I used to really like, but have no real expectations nowadays that he's going to make interesting or particularly good music. And yeah, I know that's really harsh, but going into this record, did I honestly have any evidence to expect otherwise? Chris Young may have started off in a very tasteful, adult-leaning, neo-traditional sound, and even his bro country pivot in 2013, a fair bit better than it had any right to be with AM, but his choice to work with Corey Crowder on production, who when going through his critics doesn't appear to have worked on anything that's all that memorable, has resulted in a sound that goes back to that same mature tone, but with production and writing that's way too flimsy to support him. So on top of feeling generally tepid, it's underserving an artist who frankly needs a richer instrumental palette to match his voice. One of the main reasons why I'm Coming Over in 2015 was such a disappointing and forgettable album for me. But hey, it notched just enough singles and sold just enough copies to mean Chris Young had no reason to change or vary his formula, and the lead-off single and title track for this album seemed to support that hypothesis, so okay, was I right about the rest of the album? Okay, look, I get how the beginning of this review looks. Oh, there he goes. He clearly made up his mind that this was not going to be interesting, so of course he's going to be very dismissive and hard on this project. When in reality, that's the furthest thing. I would have loved to be surprised by real quality anchoring a frontman who, again, I have always liked. But that didn't happen. And if there's a record that belongs in my short-form review format that I use whenever I go on vacation, it's really this record, because there's not a lot to say, and also because Losing Sleep is the sort of album that goes in one ear and out the other, only making an impact when it gets, well, kinda irritating. But before I get directly into that, let me discuss something from the Niall Horan review that I put out a couple of days ago, where a fair number of people expressed incredulity that I actually liked the album as much as I did, with the general consensus being that, especially on the back half, it's, well, kind of boring. Now, I would disagree with this. Each song feels fully developed and well structured. They all have a distinctive melodic groove and different textures that nearly is always at the forefront, and the production, well, not really emphasizing much of an edge, which is one of my big criticisms of the album, it does do plenty to accentuate that groove and texture that we do get. It's an unassuming record, sure, but it's subtle, and the devil's in the details that make the songs actually stand out surprisingly a fair bit. You give that album a chance, it will stick with you. So let's flip over to Losing Sleep by Chris Young, a record about the same length that does appear to have more energy on the surface, and Chris Young is a more immediately potent singer than Niall Horan, so why do I find this so much more tedious and forgettable? Well, I'll get into examples in a second, but it's arguably pretty simple. Bland compositions and production that does nothing to flatter these compositions. I remarked on Twitter that I was concerned that I couldn't hear a bass line across most of this album, but on the back half of the record, it shows up somewhat, mostly to provide flaccid foundation for verses and get utterly ignored when the electric guitars come in for the hook. If there is any emphasis on melodic groove at all, it's blocky and staccato, trying to complement skittering, trap-inspired hi-hats, fake hand claps, and chunky drum machines that, yes, they will fade back towards real drums on the hook, but that only shows that they're here to rope in a pop crowd that isn't listening anyway. A cheap attempt at modernity that really flatters nobody. And you know, it's the exact same production problem as Chris Young had on I'm Coming Over. His baritone works with instrumentation that has organic weight and texture, not these flimsy electric tones, increasingly poppy backing vocals, or bare-bones acoustic strumming for melodies that feel distressingly conventional. Hell, Hanging Out, She's Got Away, Leave Me Wanting More, maybe throw in Trouble Looking or Woke Up Like This, with only slight differences in the tempo and the overall instrumental tone. I'm fairly certain they're all based on variants of the same damn chord progression that you would hear in dozens, if not hundreds of other modern male-back country tracks. Hell, if you factor out that stuttering guitar lead on the verses, I would probably slot in the title track Losing Sleep in the same category. And when the songs feel as short and underdeveloped as they do, that's a real problem for making these tracks stand out to me. Now look, as much as I have given Corey Crowder's production some flack, because really on this album he most certainly deserves it, I will admit he's got a decent knack for some smoother, atmospheric tones and some keyboards that can complement the melody decently. great. It's nothing that Ross Copperman hasn't done a lot better for Dierks Bentley, but he at least seems to use a little bit more pedal steel on Holiday and Blacked Out, or more muted pianos on Where I Go When I Drink that sound pleasant enough to make up for songs like Radio in the Rain, which steals its entire concept from the similarly titled Rain in the Radio by the Randy Rogers Band and half the production from Shawn Mendes. But if we're gonna get into lyrics here, okay, look, the issue has never been that Chris Young and his team are bad songwriters, but it's hard not to feel like they're just completely running out of ideas, especially without Cassidy Pope and Vince Gill in order to lend some vocal variety this time on this album. If the songs are not leaning very heavily on Chris Young's baritone for sensual hookup tracks that feel increasingly interchangeable, we got songs where Chris Young is just getting blackout drunk in order to get over a breakup, like Where I Go When I Drink and the appropriately titled Blacked Out. And when you realize that his compositions feel so interchangeable, it's hard not to notice the writing falling in similar categories. And that's before you compare songs like Leave Me With Wanting More to other artists, like the earthier and far more interesting Do I Make You Wanna by Billy Currington. Seriously, one feels like a B-side of the other. And again, I get Chris Young's appeal to his target audience. He nearly always frames the women in these songs as having all the power in these relationships, which I'm sure plays really well to that target audience. I can respect that. But surely by this point, these women will notice the details are just starting to run together from song to song. At least Blacked Out tries to add a little bit more lyrical color, but between the brand name dropping and the downbeat nature of the song, seriously, why are you referencing Ray-Bans in a country song? It's just a bizarre choice to end the album, and honestly, probably not the best one. But as a whole, folks, if you liked I'm Coming Over, this is really just part 2 of it. And yet I can't say in good consciousness that this is any more worthwhile or memorable in comparison with that album. At least I'm Coming Over had Sober Saturday Night and Think of You, duets that took a little bit more of a chance with the writing, did something different, but with the wrong producer and somehow even less interesting character, I can't even see this sticking as well as that. And you know, I hate saying this about a singer that I otherwise like, but Chris Young is falling into a lane and a rut that might prove lucrative for now, but minus any significant pivot will be forgotten all too quickly by the audience. And as such, yeah, I'm thinking a strong 4 out of 10 and no recommendation for this. The record might be called Losing Sleep, but after listening to this a good 4 or 5 times, it's a pretty quick listen in that mode, I think I'll be getting all that sleep right back. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know, not entirely kind of this album. Folks, I wanted to like this, and I'll admit there are other country records that I want to cover, and I will be getting to them as soon as I can, but this just didn't do much for me at all. But hey, if you guys liked it, links to buy it in the description below, and I got the poll up there for all you Chris Young fans. Tell me how wrong I am. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to support this channel or get more involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week you guys get to add albums, movies, or even top 10 list if you're in the upper tiers of my Patreon. I really hope you guys actually get involved in this. It's really helping out the channel given that stupid yellow limited to no ads crap they tack on my videos after the first day. Yeah, it's really annoying, but we'll get through it. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.